cool. The next question is also is how long do you want this to be? Should it be 30 minutes tonight? Is an hour or 45 minutes going to be too long? I don't want to over inundate anybody. Or if tonight's just a busy night and nobody wants to be here, I could keep it to 15 minutes. Like, I get the spectrum.
30 minutes.
Okay. I'm not going to try and dive too much into some of the higher end features. I just want to give kind of a basic overview of the tool set and familiarizing yourself with the user interface, because that's, I would argue with Fusion, it's literally just knowing where the tools are. Once you actually see them, it's pretty easy. So, with that, let me try and find a laser pointer, which of course I don't have. Awesome. And that's working. Even better. Alright, so if you haven't had a chance to download it, no worries, no rush. It's not, we're not biting at the bit on this, but if it's possible to have it downloaded by next week, that'd be really cool. So we could potentially do some on-site designing, or at least more familiarization with the actual UI. And I've also created a shared, I guess this is considered like a project file. So any designs that are made can be uploaded directly to this. Anybody can access them, like I said at the last meeting. And I did find out that there isn't live time collaboration, so we don't have to deal with there's 7 people on this one document. This is gonna suck. So whenever you pull a document from this directory, it pulls it as a copy, and if 10 people save it one after another, it just versions them differently. So it's pretty easy to go back and recover potentially lost, overwritten, blah 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 issues that you would encounter with other file streams. And with that, let me close out of that. Just in case you can't find it when you first open Fusion, it's the there's the little grid in the upper left-hand corner of the data panel. Opens it. I leave it closed so you get more design space. Doesn't, user preference. Real quick rundown of the UI. Up at the top, this is our toolbar. Each of these individual functions, like the sketch, create, modify, assemble, blah, 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 have a drop-down. Each generally contains 15, 20 tools. Some of the tools have subsets as well. I'll go through each of them individually. Up in the right-hand corner, you have your quote-unquote view cube. It's how you can look at the model from all the different angles and dimensions. You can orbit around it. All of the things in the bottom of the screen are view and or surface that you're building off of modifications. Here's your orbit tool, look at pan tool. Same thing as the view cube. It just allows you to navigate 3D space easier than hoping you will land on the right face as you actually navigate around it. Then you have your browser bar. This is where you're going to see all of the different components. If you make 10 different parts, you put them into an assembly, you can look at each of the individual parts and have a breakdown of, well, what are the subcomponents that make it up? What are the sketches? What are the physical features that you've made? And you also will see that reflected in your timeline at the bottom of the screen. That is from you hit sketch to you hit finish, save. It's a full kind of history where you can step back through each individual change you made, and you can also change in between there. When you get to the end of a design, you realize I made a borehole that's, I don't know, a millimeter too small. You can step back in the design file history, find what that feature is, and change it, and it will automatically update to the best of its ability throughout the rest of the design. If it can't, it throws an error, and it gives you a couple different options. And with that, I mean, that's really all that you need to know about the UI. I don't think it's important to really jump into the fiducials there. One thing I do want to state before really getting into the physical design is there's 2 different ways to attack actually making a model. You can build something up or you can take something down. I personally like to start from building a bunch of shapes and then cutting away at them to get the finalized product I like. I think it's easier, and as you actually work through the workflow, you'll see, well, I have no idea how to make this. This kind of works, and modify it backwards from there. That's a personal preference. Everybody needs to choose what they want. In an ideal scenario, you would actually build it from kind of the ground up. But we're really working in an exploratory area where 7 mouse clicks later, you might have a totally new idea. So I'm a personal fan of build everything first and cut out of that what you want to be left with the final design. Again, user preference. First thing you're always going to see whenever you start a design is, you can kind of see with the view cube, I should have a mobile mouse, blue, green, red. Also the same thing as the view cube, and that's just to orient you when you actually start to draw something. It doesn't matter what plane you actually choose to draw on. The only thing it affects is how it imports into other 3D utilities. So if you're using a 3D printer slicer, it just changes the orientation. Grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. I usually choose I think that's our ZX plane. It's the easiest. It works the best with the view cube, and you can see the view cube now reflects that I'm looking at it from the top down. If I were to change that to one of the corners, I'd be looking at the object from a slightly different angle. And I'm gonna buzz through a lot of these features fast because these are shapes. If you want a deeper dive into that, I'll do that in the tutorials as I parse these out, kind of an in-depth review of each one. Just want to give a quick overview. So the first tool is really the 3 tools I want to go over are rectangle, circle, and arch. Those are the most common ones you're going to use from a predetermined shape. Like you can see, there's 3 different tools. I generally go with 2-point. Again, doesn't matter user preference. It depends on what kind of shape you're trying to make. 2-point is easy because you click 1 point, you drag to where you want it, you click again. There you go. That's your shape. If you want to do 3, if you want to do, and you'll see with each different tool it's kind of different. It just makes it harder. It makes it easier to achieve the shape that you're actually trying to achieve in this particular plane. Something that you may have seen, I'm going to jump. This is a keyboard shortcut. Don't worry about it. It's still just the rectangle tool. Something you'll see when you first actually go to create a sketch is a dimension on each side. So for rectangles specifically, because it's a 2-point, you get a really top and side. And it allows you to, it highlights in blue whatever one you're actively changing. So you can set this to be 45. It automatically dimensions that to be 45. If you hit tab, tab is always how you switch back and forth between a variety of different inputtable parameters, which show up in that little gray and white box. That's how you can switch back and forth to change as many times as you want going forward. So that's rectangle. Quick, simple, easy. Left clicking and dragging over the screen is a select, and delete works just like any other program. It just clears out whatever. Only 2D sketch, I'm not talking 3D yet, only 2D sketch, it deletes whatever feature you just made. Circle tool, also the same. I chose center point radius. That's my tool of choice. Doesn't really matter. Grand scheme of things, doesn't mean a whole lot. Again, tab here doesn't do anything because there's only one physically, or rather one numerical value that you can input to affect the circle. Once you hit enter once, it locks it. When you see that lock, it means you've actually dimensioned it. A driven dimension is what carries through the design file history forever. So if you try and make a change, it's going to warn you, this is set to be 50, you can't automatically scale it. Are you sure you want to make the change? That way down the line, you might, if you misclick, you're not going to affect every single part before it. It's just the one individual component you're working on. Hit enter again, there you go, and you'll see a dimension will, whenever something is properly dimensioned, it'll show up as a number with 2 arrows going to the quote-unquote datums. You can click on that and rotate it, drag it, pull it to get it out of your view, or if you really don't care, you hit delete. Which, you know, I'd love to work the first time, but it's not gonna get it out of the way. And the arc, same thing as the circle. This more moves into trying to do more organic shapes, which depends on what you really want to do. The one I chose quickly, 3-point arch. Do your 2 ends, pull it to whatever you want. It tries to fit it to a circle, or at least part of a circle. If you want to do something more organic, that's when you would start working into the spline or line tools. So line specifically is you can draw as many straight lines as you want. Whenever you want to finish, you either need to click the check mark, or click on another point to finish. If you just hit enter, it'll stop wherever you are. So just hitting enter will only make a line that long. Be warned, it gets really annoying when you have drawn 50, 60 lines as one sketch, and then all of a sudden you click enter, and it stops at the last point. So you have to go back and delete it. It'll delete the whole line. It's not a fun evening when it's especially 3 o'clock in the morning and you decide you want to do that. The last one, and arguably the most important for the stuff we're going to be doing, because we are working with organics, is spline. I'm not going to jump through the nitty-gritty of it, but click as many different points as you want, and it will try and fit a curve to that. Click enter to stop, and once it's actually made, you can adjust each of the points that you set individually. Why not? To affect how that curve actually looks. I do apologize for those of you who've seen this before. It's kind of boring. It's the basics. One other thing to be aware of, whenever you start to sketch, you'll see a sketch palette. The sketch palette is how you can align shapes as well as set physical restraints on how it's made in your grid or in your viewport. Whenever you want to use, for instance, 2 circles, you want them to be equidistant all the way around, no matter what. That's when you can start putting physical constraints, and it will put, actually a great point is 2 different lines. 2 lines intersect. Digitally, those are just 2 independent lines. If you put a physical constraint on it, I think with the coincident tool, those 2 lines now are stuck together until you physically break that. So if you try and move it, it's going to give you a warning. Do you want to move both of them? Or if you want to scale one individually, it'll also warn you this is constrained to another object. Do you want to break, modify, change? Blah, blah, blah. Again, keyboard shortcut here for the circle tool. You can see them next to the individual tools if they exist. Here is the 2D to 3D. This is everything that you're going to find under your Create tool. This is pretty much exclusively, you have a 2D object, you want to make it 3D, or you have like a 1D line, and you want to add some physical dimension to it. And the extrude tool is your primary method of making a 2D object 3D in a single, like an axial direction. It's a lot harder to do. Multi-axial, you have to do multiple sketches for that. So you click on the object that you actually want to extrude, it'll highlight in blue. You'll be given 2 options. You can input a physical dimension in the little input window that pops up. You can do it in the palette window that pops up, or you can also drag the arrows that come up. Going one way or another doesn't really matter. It just changes the dimension it goes in your actual plane. When you're done, click enter, and there you go. That's your actual 3D object. Using the view cube, you can navigate around, look at all the different views, look underneath. Just again, a kind of a quick way to navigate through. And I'm going to make a jump. Tell me if you want me to back up and explain this a little bit better. But whenever you build a 3D object, you can build 2D objects on top of that to either create, and this is treated as a body, or the cylinder is an entity in itself. So you can add to that physical entity, which is using the join function. You can take away from that, which is the cut function, or you can make 2 different bodies just stacked on top of each other, so you can manipulate them individually. And that's where you want to draw a new sketch on any one of the faces you made. And I'm going to just choose the top because it's easiest. I'm going to make a rectangle. Whenever you're done using a tool, hit escape. It'll exit out. And then I like to go off to the side so you can actually see what you're doing. And here's what I'm talking about. Currently, I'm joining. That's under your operation tool. It's physically extending the body at hand. I go the other way, and now I'm actually cutting it out. So if I were to cut, I'll leave it. Now you can see, looking from the top down, really the side down, I've now physically removed part of the object. And that's what I'm talking about with either building up and subtracting away, or designing from the ground up what you really want. This is the way to make a through hole. This is the way to make, like if you've got to put a screw into an object, you would make a hole however deep you want it. And you can cut it away quickly and easily without using one of the other tool sets. I'm going to back up just a little bit. One of the other things that you can do is create, actually, let me see if I can't rebuild this. Command. forgive me, let me get caught up here. Extrude, shortcut key is E. Again, it's under the Create menu. So now that you've actually created your 3D object, there's a couple things you can do. You can continue to add 2D parts to continue to build a 3D one, or you can physically modify the one that you have created, and that's going to be under a few of them. A few of the tools are under Create. Most of it is going to be under, actually almost all of them are going to be under Modify. A few different things. Arguably the most important, or at least the one I use the most, is the Fillet tool. That's going to take a sharp edge and round it. So select whatever edge you want. Input whatever radius you want, as well as how you want to actually fillet it. If you want it constant, if you want it variable, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to get into the details, like some of the smaller details, because it's pretty easy to explore, and I'd rather not, make everybody brain dead on a Wednesday. And I know I talk too much. So, real quick, go to 10, boom, it cuts off, or rather, it creates a fitted circle with a radius of 10, and it shaves off that much of the edge. You can go all the way around. Come in. It'd be awesome if this worked the first time. That's all I really want. So if I select all of the edges at the top, I take 10 off of them together. This is the shape you get. You go farther and farther and farther. Eventually you'll hit a point where you can't take any more. So if I try to input 50, I've completely destroyed the rectangle. It's a method. It works. Do it if you want, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's a lot easier to actually draw the shape that you'd be interested in. I'm going to change it back to 10. Typically speaking, whenever you're making parts fit together, from a 3D printing standpoint, it's always better to have a rounded edge. The 3D printer is never accurate enough, or rather the printers that we'll have access to aren't going to be accurate enough that you put something at 1 inch wide, you make a hole that it's supposed to seat into at 1 inch wide, it's not going to fit. If you leave a little bit of that rounded edge, there's a potential that it can slide in, and if nothing else, it's going to make lining it up easier instead of trying to do 1 inch square hole. Just something to be warned about. And whenever you're designing a part, try and account for, I like to call it the wiggle room, if you're in millimeters, which I would recommend everybody doing, it gets a lot easier. Because everything 3D printing is millimeters. That aside, in millimeters, I like to leave 0.5 millimeter to a full millimeter of free space around an object. So if I was making a hole to fit this square head, I would leave 0.5 on every single side. 3D printers aren't precise enough, and the material itself will shrink when you actually print it. So you'll design something, it'll look beautiful, you go to fit it together, and then you're pounding your head on the table because it doesn't fit. And when it's a 16, 17-hour print, that really sucks. And it's never, especially the next morning when you come back, and you're like, awesome, it's good to go, we're ready for the deadline, you go to put it together. Yeah, no. Try again. Other important things. Shell function is something that can be useful for some, not useful for all. This is how you hollow out an object. So if you have built something up, you want to spend the time to physically hollow it out or make it hollow, using the shell, you select every single face that you want to work with. So if you want to hollow out an entire object, you have to select every single face. If you leave one face out, it cuts it off completely, and I'll show you that. Want to make an internal thickness of 5? Boom. 5. There you go. What you can't see, and what I'll try to show, I won't do a good job of it. Inside is hollow. Right there's the end of the cube with a 5 millimeter thickness. If you were to not actually, my apologies. If you weren't going to use the shell feature on all the different faces, what you'd be left with is command. You'd think I'd have it together to teach a lesson, but evidently not. Okay, working our way backwards. Sorry, this is mostly for people who want to watch this separately because it records all my keystrokes. Modify shell. 1, 2, 3, 3. Leave it at 5. Why won't you work? This is supposed to be easy. Ah, there it is. That's what you have to be careful of. Don't leave faces unselected. I'm giving up. I'm going to post this in a tutorial later. Because now it's starting to piss me off. That's a really quick overview of 2D, 3D. There's a lot more that you can do. For instance, you can actually create a hole. So you can create threads. You can create a web is when you actually lay down like a grid of lines. You can use the web tool inside of an object to provide structural support. Ribbing is, again, something that you have to draw beforehand and then use the rib tool, but that's going to allow you to, on a sharp corner, create a support. If you're working with an elbow, it would allow you to kind of put a single piece or a solid kind of a wing to provide support in an area where you might feel more force. Real quick, and I'm going to try and hopefully finish this up. Oh, actually, really quick, just walking back through the history file. So if you hit play, it steps you through each individual thing that you did. Okay, man. This will play it like a video, or you can step through each individual change that you made, just as a note. I'm going to open a new file just so I can show you this without beating my head against a table. If, perchance, you wanted to make an object in 2 different planes and draw between them, like you wanted to go square to a circle, but you didn't want to, try and properly, or rather, you didn't want to try and calculate how to do that, the easiest thing to do is draw your first shape. This is a whole nother toolbox. This is the offset plane. So this is working in, I've drawn something on what's considered my XY plane. I want to draw something that is 5 millimeters above it, but I don't want to actually do that 3-dimensionally. I want to draw two-dimensional surfaces and then connect between the two. That's where you'd use the offset plane. So choose where you started, choose where you want to be at. I'm going to make it 100 just so this actually works. And then the next thing you go to do is you'll have the choice of choosing. You can draw on the original 3 planes that's provided with the viewport, or you can draw on the plane that you've created 100 millimeters above. I want to draw a circle that's significantly larger than the rectangle below, and I want to try and connect the two. You can try and do that mathematically. It sucks. Or you can use the loft tool. Loft takes any 2 2D faces that you've drawn, and it does its best to try and connect the two with whatever magic it works in the background. So select your first profile, select your second profile, and it's kind of hard to see from this view, but let's flip it, and let's flip it. This is what you're actually left with. So it will do its best to create as many lines as necessary, straight lines, unless you tell it otherwise, from one face to another face. And let's go to side view. This is what it kind of looks like. Really, really nice if you need to do a friction fit. You can have a shape at the bottom, generally taper it off to a circle. You try and press the 2 parts together, and it'll fit pretty nicely. Other things, other quick tools. Be warned of draft tool. This is a way of taking an existing shape that you have and kind of cutting off at an angle. It gets tricky, and I still haven't perfected using it. I find a lot of times you click on 3 things that you want to try and draft, and all of a sudden it cuts away all your faces. Just be warned. I already went over shell. Chamfer is the same thing as fillet, straight line. You can tell it to do it at a set angle, 45 degrees directly from the line you draw. You can give it any kind of pitch and yaw that you really want. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of it. Sweep tool is pretty fun. If you draw a 2D object, for instance, if I drew the square and I drew the circle and I made a spline line, which is that organic line between the two, you can sweep along a profile. So it follows a shape along whatever path you specify with the straight or kind of curved line. For fingers especially, that's how I've told people to make fingers. You draw your circle, you draw the path that you want it to follow in 3D space, and then you just use the sweep tool to kind of follow along that curve. Another one that's actually really helpful. Go away, go away, go away. Come on. Cool. We're gonna have a heart attack. Be warned, Fusion 360 is cloud-based, so it does have some latency. It works offline on your computer, so if you have internet restrictions, it's not an issue, but it will take up a lot more of your system if you don't have access to any form of internet. One last thing, and then I'm gonna try and finish up. The revolve tool. So take a 2D face, specify whatever axis you want to rotate it around, and specify the angle that you want to actually go off of. So just for giggles, don't forget about your pan tool. Pan is how you actually move in the frame. This is what it would look like if I wanted to create a half cylinder or I specify 80 degrees. Yeah, we'll make it 90. A 90-degree turn and 3D object off of a face. You can do whatever angle you want. You can do a couple different options, like Full's 360. 2 would be if you have a face. So actually, imagine you had a rectangular face here, a rectangular face here. You could use the revolve tool and use the 2 function to go from one rectangular face to the other without having to worry about, well, what happens if I've gone too far? It's going to cut off my detail, blah, 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 blah. Another really quick note. If I draw 2 objects offset from one another, I'll make this 10. And I do apologize, I am rushing through this quickly. You can draw through another object, put it in as deep as you want. I should phrase that better. You can extrude as far into the other object as you want, and it will not affect the actual body. So if you go, as long as you're using the join tool, if you go all the way through or only to a face, it makes absolutely no difference. What you're designing is a solid 3D object unless you otherwise specify. So if 2 3D objects overlap by a millimeter, Fusion 360 goes, okay, I know the 2 of them exist. Are they independent bodies? Nope. You're just joining them together? Okay, and it'll cut out that extra centimeter that you've put into the other body. So don't be concerned about extruding too far or extruding too short into another body. It automatically joins them and cuts off any extra to cut down on your file size. With that, I think the only other thing I want to do really quick is go over 2-dimensional tools using, for instance, if I want to make a rectangle that has part of a circle off the end of it. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you know, you do you. When you use the extrude tool, it automatically assumes if you have an overlap, you want these 2 objects to be separate. So click, click, click. Now you've got all of them. You leave that center part out and extrude, and now that part is left untouched. Now, assuming you're as picky as I am, you can actually cut lines that overlap. So using the sketch, there's a bunch. Trim, extend, break. Trim is the one that I want to highlight. Using the trim tool, you can actually cut out parts of a line where they overlap. And there you go. Now you have one solid body. You don't have to worry about 2 different sketches impeding on each other. Go ahead and extrude, and away you go. With that, I think that's the quickest overview I want to give without over-inundating people. And feel free to ask questions. I'm going to try and actually put out tutorials this week. I'm here this weekend, so I should have a lot of time to do it. And don't be afraid to explore. When I learned Fusion, I'm sorry, this is going to be a story. I'm going to try and keep it short. When I learned Fusion, I was thrown into the deep end, and it was very much go. You have a week. If you have any questions, come ask. Other than that, I want to hear you. Sit over your corner, do your nerd stuff, figure it out. And that was particularly challenging because nobody was like, well, try this, try this, try this, try this. But in hindsight, the only reason that I'm still as comfortable with Fusion as I am is I don't know what a function is, I try it. Because what's the worst thing that happens? Control Z. Nothing's gone. I haven't lost anything. So explore all the different functions. Try and test, play. You don't know what it is? Click on it. It'll give you a description. Try and see what the function does. If it throws an error, look at what the error is. That is by far the best way to try and actually learn Fusion. That being said, when I make tutorials weekly, I want to do not a design challenge, but call it like a micro lesson. Here's a bunch of tools in previous tutorials. Using those tools, try to create this. I'll have basic functions, basic shapes, and also do a full video. So if it's, well, I don't really know how to do an individual component, I'll do a whole walkthrough video so you can actually step through each individual part. The follow-up to that is in the email I sent out last week. If anybody has something that they designed within 2 weeks of this first meeting, I will print it. It won't come out of the club budget. Like, go wild. And I am going to say it again because it has happened. If it looks anatomical, it's not getting printed. I cannot stress that enough. I was tricked once. I will never be tricked again. Not happening. If I think it looks like it, sorry, it's not going to get printed. But if you design anything that you want, be it a phone stand, be it a desk organizer. Of course I didn't bring it with me. But you saw the picture in the email. Like, I got bored. I made a desk organizer. I see the whispers, and it concerns me. Something to hold your books. I don't know. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could literally be a square. Cool. Make a 3D square. I'll print you a 3D square. Whatever. So go crazy, go wild, design something non-anatomical, and I would happily print it for you guys. I have a couple colors. I have a couple materials. That's the way I started. That's the way I was pushed with not a whole lot of direction. And that's what kind of pushed me over the edge with actually exploring Fusion. So come up with something cool. If you have questions, you need inspiration, I have little daily use items that I'd be happy to email around, or just message me on GroupMe. And if you get it in 2 weeks, I'll print it. That's really all I have. Sorry to run over. I didn't do too bad. Cool. I know it's a little monotonous. I do apologize. I didn't have time to really prep this, but I will start making more in-depth actual recordings of the tool set, basic functions, as well as some of the more advanced things for somebody who wants to try out different tools. But don't be afraid to explore, ask questions, or call me stupid. You can sit in your room and whisper it. You can tell me to my face. I get it. I need it. I need the feedback. Preferably not stupid in front of other people, but, again, you do you. Whatever makes you happy. With that, thank you for coming, and enjoy your Wednesday and or Monday. I envy you. Thank you.